You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and here we talk about building and growing and monetizing your online platform. We talk about taking your passion, turning it into a platform, helping you earn a paycheck from it. And many of us have deeper level motivations for the ministries and the work and the platforms and all these things that we do online. And in fact, this week we're going to be talking about ministry in detail. Our topic this week, and this isn't a topic that we've directly addressed in recent days. So I'm really excited to be doing this, but we're going to be talking about how and why to start an online ministry. As I record our podcast here, we have people from all over the United States. We have Alaska represented, we have the South and the West represented, we have the Northeast, we have the Midwest. So all different regions of the United States represented on our live call here tonight. And I'm really looking forward to the time that we'll be spending after we finish recording the podcast here with some Q&A with our group and with our guests. But again, our theme this week, we're talking about how and why to start an online ministry. And I want to give you a little bit of a background on this before I make some suggestions and bring up some, what I think are going to be some useful ideas for those of us that have been thinking about this. But I'll give you a little background on how this sort of thing got on my radar even to begin with. Years ago, I met and became friends with a pastor. Now, when I first met him, I was still in college, but I was about a year away from serving in full-time pastoral ministry. So I remember at the time I had a lot of questions for him and some of the other pastors that I knew. I used to pepper them with questions all the time. But one of the big questions that I regularly wanted to discuss was related to the subject of sermon preparation. I wanted to know how this pastor I became friends with, how he prepared his messages, and I would ask other pastors these questions as well. But this particular friend of mine, I also wanted to know what he did with those messages after he preached them. Did he save them and use them for other purposes? What happened to them after he preached them? And I was very shocked by his answer. In fact, I'm still shocked by his answer. His process of preparation was not what shocked me, but I was disturbed by what he told me that he did with his sermons after he delivered them. And he told me that he routinely made a habit of throwing his notes away after he spoke. And I remember when he told me this, I could not understand why he did that. Why would he throw his notes away after spending many hours working on those messages? How could he justify tossing those notes in the trash? By the way, as I record this podcast, there are several people serving in various teaching roles or pastoral ministry that are live on the call here with me. And I am certain that right now they're probably scratching their heads too, thinking, why would you just throw it away? But then as time went on, I started actively serving in a pastoral role. I finished up my studies, finished up college, all of that. And I was serving as the pastor of a local church. And I began preparing and delivering many sermons and other lessons. That became a very, very much part of my week. And I made a point to keep everything I prepared. But even as I was doing that, something else bothered me. And I realized most of those messages were delivered just one time. They were delivered once, and then they went into a file, never to be heard from again. So it was essentially like I was throwing them in the trash because beyond the moment they were delivered, these sermons had no second life. There was no second opportunity for anyone to hear them or to even read their content. They weren't recorded. The text wasn't made public. Either you heard the messages when they were first delivered or you missed them completely. That's what took place. And so in time, I remember I started to feel like this was very poor stewardship of the content that I had spent a lot of time creating. So I started thinking about additional ways that this content could be shared. And one of the beautiful things about living in this era of history is that we have access to the internet, and the internet makes so many options available for us. So many things are possible, so many things are affordable, so many things are accessible. And so I started trying to share those messages in several different ways online. I actually began the process by creating self-published books by using the text of those messages to kind of, put that content together into self-published books. And I wanted to see how that went. So I preach those messages, collect a group of them together, put them together in a self-published book, and just tested it out, see how it went. when that went well, I was very relieved and very grateful that that seemed to be going reasonably well. So when that went well, I had another idea. And the next idea was I started recording my sermons and sharing them as podcast episodes. I had become a very big fan of podcasts. I started consuming them regularly, and I thought, why not share these things via the podcast apps on my phone or different apps that people would utilize. So again, I started recording my sermons and other content, sharing them as podcasts, and then not long after that, I created a website and I began posting my sermon notes as blog posts. And eventually, then connected to that, I also invited people to sign up for my email list so I could share this content with them weekly via a newsletter that would go out to those that were on my email list. And this was the process that I started doing. It became a very consistent thing. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I knew that it made me happy because I felt like I was being a better steward of my time, a better steward of the resources that I was now creating, particularly that sermon content. I was really happy that it had a second life outside of the initial moments when I was first sharing that. But the results, what came from it, now these didn't all happen immediately, but the things that came from it over the next few years after I really committed to creating this content each week and I stayed with it, but the results over the next few years honestly surprised and amazed me. What happened was it kind of started with those books. So the self-published books really started to gain traction. People started sharing that content. I remember one time a popular blog picked up a promotion I was doing on one of the books on marriage, and that book got downloaded so many times. I was surprised by it. At this point now, so as I'm recording this right now in mid 2024, at this point, almost 200,000 copies of my books are either in print or have been downloaded as ebooks. So this eventually led to a publishing contract with Penguin Random House, and if you don't know what they are the largest publisher in the United States, and they said, "We would like the rights to your next book. We would like to work together with you to publish your next book." So together with them, I published a book called Dwell on These Things, and now that book in particular is not only available online, but it's also available in every major bookstore in the United States because of that partnership with Penguin Random House. And I also discovered, due to that partnership, that Walmart and Target also carry Dwell on These Things on their websites. I haven't seen it in their stores, but I have seen it on their websites. Regarding the podcasts, here's what happened. At present, my podcasts have been downloaded over 14 million times, and one particular show, the Chapter a Day Audio Bible, regularly ranks as one of the top Christian podcasts in most English-speaking countries. Regarding the blog, at this point now, several of the blog posts rank in the top 10 for their search results in Google and in other search engines. And in 2023, I was offered a contract with Salem Media Group that invited me to make podcasts that I was creating, part of their Life Audio podcasting network. And then that connection also led to me becoming a contributing writer for Christianity.com. Now, that's the trajectory of things that happened over the course of years as I was trying to be a better steward of the content that the Lord had given me to share with my local church. I was feeling like I wasn't a good steward of it, so I was looking for different ways that I could share it online. And in the Lord's providence, He chose to bless that. This was, by the way, precisely what I wanted to see happen when I started sharing my ministry content online. But one of the things that you know and I know is that even though I could be faithful to share that content, I had no control over the results. All I could do is faithfully share what the Lord was teaching me in the hope of helping other people grow spiritually as well. If you follow any of my faith-based content, I host all of my faith-based content on my website at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. And there's something special about sharing it online that makes me happy every time I think about it. And the thing that really makes me happy, and some of us were talking about this before we went live with the podcast this week here, when we were just in our group conversation, but one of the things that really makes me happy about it is the fact that through these opportunities, whether it's through podcasting, blogging, self-published books, website content, online video, whatever it may be, Through these means, I now have the privilege to reach more people each week than ever before, but it would not have happened if I kept this content hidden away in file cabinets or in computer folders, if it wasn't given a second life, if I did not choose to be a steward of this content and make it more public. None of those things, things that still amaze me, things that I'm grateful for, none of those things would have happened if I kept that content hidden. So I bring up my background and I bring up those experiences and that testimony to ask you this question. Have you ever wondered if you've been called to do something similar? Has that ever occurred to you? Do you ever wonder if you've been called to do something similar to what I just described? Here's another way that I look at this. The internet, all of us access the internet for a variety of reasons. We use it for learning, we use it for entertainment, we use it for communication. But you also discover when you use the internet that the internet's actually filled with garbage. It's filled with all kinds of unwholesome content. And I wonder, wouldn't it be amazing if a whole bunch of us just decided to maybe make a dent in that and maybe change that a little bit by flooding the online space with good and godly content instead? I wonder what kind of difference we could make. I know I receive emails frequently from people that are utilizing the content that I've been sharing, and they say, look, this is helping me in my walk with the Lord. This is helping me grow spiritually. And I wonder if all of us decided to be stewards of the content that we've been blessed with and started sharing these things in this way, what kind of dent could we make in online culture? What kind of dent could we make in helping people grow spiritually? I know that that's something I would love to see happen, especially in light of the fact that there are so many people using the internet for negative things. But if this is something that's something you feel led to do, it's something I certainly felt led to do, and it's become one of the most exciting things I've ever gotten involved in. Let me offer a few suggestions here. I just want to simplify a few things here and break this down into several very practical suggestions that I hope you find helpful if this is something that you are thinking about doing with some of the content you're creating. And I just have, it's basically a list of 8 things here that I'm about to recommend, and they're all very simple and in some respects maybe common sense. But these are things that if I could go back in time and speak to a younger version of myself and explain certain things to myself about how this process was going to work, these are 8 things I would have told myself. And so I'm sharing these things with you. If you've ever thought about creating an online ministry, if you've ever felt led to start something like this, it's something that I've very much enjoyed doing. But if that's your calling, I want to give you 8 suggestions that I hope save you a lot of time and a lot of aggravation. And I want to start off with something foundational. Suggestion number 1 is this: make sure your understanding of the Bible and theology is on point. And what I mean by that is this: take the time to learn the scriptures so you don't inadvertently promote anything inaccurate or untrue, like I see some online influencers do. And I look at that, and especially in the faith-based space, we need to make sure that we're promoting solid content, good theology, solid Bible teaching. So make sure your understanding of the scriptures, make sure your understanding of theology, make sure it's all on point. Take the time to learn the scriptures so you don't inadvertently promote anything inaccurate or untrue. So let me just throw that out there as a foundational piece. Now, number 2 is this: start with what you have. Start with what you have. So, is there something you're already creating that you could easily share publicly? Content you're already creating. So, in my world, since I serve as a local church pastor, I've been serving as a pastor for 26 years now, full time, and very much enjoy it. But in the process of serving in my role, obviously, there's all kinds of content that I'm already creating. I'm creating Bible lessons, I'm creating sermons, various other forms of content as well. And so my question for you is there content you're already creating? Something you don't need to create from scratch because you're already creating it. Things that you're putting together maybe to include in a book, or things that you write just because you enjoy writing them, or whatever it may be. Is there something you're already creating that you could easily share publicly? I just want to throw that out there. Think about what that might be. You could give it a second life. You could be a steward of that content in a way that could be a blessing to other people and possibly even to yourself. All right, number 3 on my list of suggestions is this: be consistent so you'll gain momentum. I oftentimes speak about this here in platform launchers, and those that are part of our members club have probably heard me say this more times than they can count. But I encourage people to post new content every single week. One of the reasons that some people really struggle to gain momentum with their online platforms is that they post occasionally, or they post when they feel inspired to post, but they're not posting every single week. They're not sharing blog posts every single week. It's just every now and then. It's kind of hit and miss. That never really helps an online platform gain momentum if you're just doing it on occasion as you feel inspired occasionally to do so. You've got to be consistent if you want to gain momentum. You basically need to tr- I guess for lack of a better word, train the audience that listens to your content or reads your content to know that there are certain days when they can expect new content to arrive. So if you typically post new blog posts on Sunday evening, great. Make sure you stick to that schedule. If you typically release your weekly podcast on Wednesday afternoon, that's fine. Just make sure you're always posting it at the same time. Be consistent so you'll gain momentum, and make sure you're posting something new every single week. I would encourage you not to skip a week if you want to start gaining momentum. And by momentum, I mean, building an audience that regularly listens or utilizes or reads your content. All right, number 4 on my list is this: add new forms of content gradually. So I'm a big fan of starting with something written. So typically for me, that means I'm starting with a blog post that I then turn into a podcast or into a video or into a book chapter or into a newsletter, something like that. But if you're blogging, you don't have to immediately add a podcast, and you don't have to immediately add a YouTube channel. But if you do choose to add them, don't rush to do it overnight. Get into the rhythm of consistently creating one new piece of weekly blog content. And then once you prove to yourself and to your audience that you could be consistent with that, continue doing that, keep up with the consistency, but then consider adding something additional. So add new forms of content gradually. Number 5 on my list is this: choose an easy to name, or an easy to remember name, I should say. Choose an easy to remember name for your platform. Easy to remember. Sometimes people get way too creative with this stuff, and as a result, people have no idea what their platform's all about. I'll give you an example from my own world. So my faith-based content can be found at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. I find that's an easy to use title. It's easy for my audience to find. It's easy for them to remember. It's easy for them, right when I say what it is, for them to understand exactly what it's about. Not hard to figure out. So I'd encourage you to choose an easy to remember name for your platform. Easy to remember, easy to spell, all of that. All right, number 6, and this is one, if you're just starting out in particular, I think you'll probably amen this pretty quickly. But number 6 is keep your expenses down. You don't have to spend a fortune to do this. I see some people spend a fortune trying to get things off the ground. The truth is, you really don't have to spend a fortune to do this. I would recommend, if you're just starting out, using services like Squarespace for your website in particular, and your blog. You do that all with Squarespace. And Podbean for your podcast. That's a affordable, economical way to get things started. They are not expensive. Those are 2 services that I used when I was getting started. I primarily use Kajabi now because I wanted to manage many, many things. But Kajabi is much more expensive than Squarespace and Podbean. So if you can afford it, by all means, use Kajabi. But if you're just starting out, I'd encourage you to keep your expenses down. And here's another expense-related thing that I just want to put on your radar. If you're going to publish books, if that's going to be part of your online ministry, you want to publish books, I'd recommend using the free services at Amazon through their Kindle Direct publishing platform. Those services work great. Most people, when they buy books, they buy them from Amazon. Sometimes I hear stories of people spending many, many, many thousands of dollars to publish a book. And you can do that if that's what you choose to do. There's some excellent services out there that cost money. But if you're just starting out and you want to keep things lean, you could publish a book absolutely free on Amazon through their Kindle Direct publishing platform, and that will help you keep expenses down. 2 more suggestions for you on this list of 8. Number 7, utilize crowdfunding as a way to keep your expenses low. We were just talking about this with some of our guests and some of our members just before we went live with the podcast this week. But one of our friends here, Michelle, she just utilized crowdfunding for the first time this week, and she said 5 people in her day-to-day life signed up for her crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is a great way that to actually fund what you're doing online. We know that there are expenses to what you're doing, even if you keep things economical by using Squarespace and Podbean and things like that. You're still going to have expenses if you get into podcasting. That means you're going to have to buy a microphone. You're going to want to make sure you keep your computer up to date. There are expenses to do online anything, including online ministry, but utilizing crowdfunding can be a great way to help keep your expenses low. There are people who will gladly support you through things like buymeacoffee.com. That's a wonderful service. I utilize that regularly. It's fantastic. There's also things like patreon.com, and they're just crowdfunding forms of like they facilitate crowdfunding. And if the content you're producing is helpful, these are things that you could start promoting and letting people know, hey, if you want to chip in a little bit for what I'm doing, you go to buymeacoffee.com/ and then you just pick whatever handle you're going to use with that, and just recommend people support you through that. Crowdfunding is a great way, though, to fund what you're doing and keep your expenses in check. Number 8, this is the last thing on my list for now. I could make this list a million things, but I decided to limit it to 8 this week because these are very important foundational things. But number 8 is find people to partner with and learn from. This is something that I did not do right away. I basically operated like a solo artist. And when I look back at it, I think, all right, I could have saved myself some time and I could have saved myself some costly mistakes if I looked around and maybe just tried to find some people to partner with and learn from. You'll save yourself some costly mistakes if you could find some good sources. You will also find the inspiration, the information, and the accountability that you receive from a good group extremely valuable. Now, I'm biased, but I would definitely recommend joining the members club at platformlaunchers.com at least for a month or two to help you get started and set your platform on a trajectory of growth. But whatever you do, don't try and do everything alone. Find people to partner with and learn from. I really wish I did that sooner. I eventually did it, but I did not do that right away. I could have saved myself a lot of time if I spent some time around other people who are also trying to do what I do online. Now, there's a lot more I could say about this subject, but I'm going to finish with this. Building an online ministry might become one of the most valuable and consequential things you ever choose to do. I think if you're passionate about helping people meet Jesus, if you're passionate about helping people grow spiritually, if you're passionate about helping people learn the scriptures accurately and to just become healthy in all kinds of areas, relationally, physically, spiritually, all of these things, this may be an approach worth taking. It certainly has been for me. It's been one of the absolute best things I've ever invested my time in. It's extremely fruitful. It's one of those things that I'm so glad that it's part of my daily life. I honestly couldn't imagine my life being without it at this point. Serving people through this content that I get to share online. I'm encouraged as I do it, but I'm particularly encouraged as people testify to the fact that they find it genuinely helpful. If you like creating content, you have a desire to get this out there, and you want to genuinely help people, please don't make the mistake of creating content and just putting it in a file somewhere, never to be seen again. Please don't make the mistake of creating helpful things that just get thrown out because they're not given some sort of a second life. Figure out a recipe here that works for you to share these content pieces that you've been creating as a form of an online ministry. I doubt you'll regret doing so. I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy it, and it's just a wonderful way to glorify God and serve other people at the same time. In just a moment, I'm going to be segueing into a live Q&A that I'm hosting with our members club and with some guests that are on. If you'd ever like to join us for one of these things, you could take a test drive of our members club at platformlaunchers.com. We hope you'll check it out. But in the meantime, we hope you have a wonderful week, and we look forward to catching up with you again right here next time. Take care.